Velcthor had evaluated over 4,000 warriors, but the moment the human girl smiled, the scanner declared her a Class S threat. Velcthor had been teaching combat techniques at the Galactic Defense Academy for 17 cycles, and in that time, he had evaluated approximately 4,612 cadets from across 73 different species. He considered himself quite reasonably an expert in xenophysiology, combat potential assessment, and the fine art of separating genuine warriors from the ones who simply looked impressive in recruitment hollows. So naturally, when the human walked into his evaluation chamber, he was already composing his report in his head. Cadet Joanna Briggs stood at approximately 1.7 meters tall, which by galactic standards made her laughably short. Her frame carried muscle, sure, but nothing compared to a Kravian shock trooper or even a standard Pelaxian grunt. She had that peculiar Deathworlder tan that humans developed under their yellow sun, dark hair pulled back in what his database informed him was called a ponytail, and eyes that were such a light brown they almost appeared golden in the chamber's standard lighting. She also had a smile that made Velcthor's secondary stomach clench uncomfortably, though he attributed that to the protein paste he had consumed that morning. "Cadet Briggs," Velcthor announced, his vocal synthesizer translating his native Fexuri into galactic standard with only minor clicking sounds. "I am Senior Combat Instructor Velcthor. This is your mandatory close quarters combat evaluation. Do you understand the parameter?" "Yes, sir," Joanna replied, her voice carrying that strange flat quality that human vowels always seemed to possess. "Standard sparring protocols, non-lethal force only. Match continues until submission or instructor assessment completion." Velcthor's mandibles twitched in what might have been approval. At least this one had read the manual, unlike the last human who had wandered into his chamber 3 months ago asking if they could, quote, just wing it. That particular evaluation had ended with Velcthor filing a 17-page incident report and the human in question spending 2 days in medical because apparently their species had not yet evolved past the concept of overconfidence. "Correct," Velcthor confirmed, moving toward the center of the padded evaluation floor, his forearms flexed in sequence, a warm-up routine he had perfected over countless sessions. "The combat scanner will monitor all physiological responses, threat assessment levels, and technique efficiency. It is, I assure you, extremely accurate." The scanner in question hummed quietly along the chamber walls, a semicircular array of sensors and analytical equipment that cost more than most colony ships. It could detect heart rate variations, muscular tension patterns, neurological stress responses, and approximately 600 other data points that Velcthor barely understood but trusted implicitly. Currently it displayed Joanna's baseline readings in soft blue holographic text: heart rate, 72 beats per minute, respiratory function, normal, threat assessment, minimal, expected combatant classification, Class D-, potentially Class C if she demonstrated above-average reflexes. Velcthor had seen these ratings 1,000 times before. Adequate, unremarkable, standard. "The evaluation will proceed in stages," he continued, circling slowly to observe her stance. She had positioned herself in what appeared to be a modified guard position, weight distributed evenly, hands loose at her sides rather than raised defensively. Sloppy, but perhaps she was nervous. "I will gradually increase pressure and complexity. Your goal is to demonstrate competence, not to win. Do you have any questions?" "Just one, sir," Joanna said, and that smile widened fractionally. "Are you left-side dominant or ambidextrous?" Velcthor paused mid-step. In 17 cycles, exactly 3 cadets had ever asked him about his fighting preference before an evaluation began, and all 3 had gone on to become exceptional tactical officers. It suggested awareness, analysis, preparation. It suggested she had been paying attention. "Ambidextrous," he answered carefully, reassessing her just slightly, "though I favor my upper left arm for precision strikes." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious, sir," she replied, rolling her shoulders in a loose, easy motion that suggested either complete relaxation or complete readiness. With humans, Velcthor was learning, it was often impossible to tell the difference. "I like to know what I am working with." The scanner beeped softly, updating her threat classification to Class C based purely on the tactical awareness demonstrated in her question. Velcthor noticed, filed it away, and decided that perhaps this human might actually be worth the time investment. "Very well," he announced, settling into his primary combat stance, upper arms raised in guard position while his lower arms remained loose and ready for grappling. "Begin when ready, Cadet Briggs." Demonstrate your worthiness to wear that uniform. Joanna's smile never wavered, and she shifted her weight forward precisely 6 centimeters. The scanner registered her heart rate dropping to 68 beats per minute, and Velkthor, veteran of 1,000 evaluation matches, made his first mistake of the day by assuming that meant she was calming down, not preparing. Velkthor opened with a textbook jab from his upper right arm, a probing strike designed to test reaction time and defensive instinct. It was the same opener he had used in approximately 90% of his evaluations, a safe, controlled movement that allowed him to gauge his opponent without risking actual injury. Joanna swayed 3 centimeters to the left, and his fist passed through empty air with room to spare. Interesting, but not unprecedented. Velkthor followed with a low sweep from his lower left leg. Standard combination number 4, fully expecting to see the human either jump awkwardly or stumble backward into a defensive scramble. Instead, Joanna shifted her weight, lifted her front foot precisely high enough to let his leg pass underneath, and was somehow closer to him when she landed than she had been before the sweep started. The scanner beeped, her threat classification updated to Class C+. Velkthor's mandibles clicked in mild surprise and he increased his tempo by approximately 15%, a double strike combination, upper arms working in synchronized harmony, aiming for center mass where even a glancing blow would demonstrate the significant strength differential between their species. Joanna's hands came up in a blur of motion, deflecting both strikes with what his combat training identified as redirecting blocks rather than direct opposition. She was not trying to match his strength. She was using angles, leverage, the kind of technical precision that took most cadets months to develop. And she was still smiling. Good form, Cadet, Velkthor admitted, backing off half a step to reassess. The scanner was now displaying her heart rate at 65 beats per minute, which made absolutely no sense because combat engagement should have elevated it to at least 90. You have clearly received quality instruction. Let us increase the difficulty. He did not wait for her response before launching a legitimate attack sequence, the kind he reserved for cadets who had demonstrated genuine potential, a high-low-middle combination from 3 different arms simultaneously, forcing her to choose which strike to defend against and which to accept. Joanna ducked under the high strike, slapped aside the low one with her left hand, and somehow twisted her torso in a way that made the middle strike miss by millimeters without her even appearing to acknowledge it. The scanner emitted a sharp chirp. Threat classification, Class B. Velkthor felt his secondary heart rate increase, which was his body's way of informing him that perhaps he should be beat this more seriously. He pressed forward, using his reach advantage to maintain distance while throwing calculated strikes designed to test her defensive capability. Jab, cross, uppercut, sweep, a full-body rotating strike from his lower right arm that had enough force to dent lightweight armor plating. She blocked it with her forearm. Not dodged, not redirected, blocked, straight-on direct opposition, and the impact made a sound like 2 Duraplast training batons colliding. Joanna slid backward approximately 30 centimeters from the kinetic transfer, her boots squeaking against the padded floor, but she remained upright, balanced, and that cursed smile never even flickered. The scanner began flashing amber warning indicators along its display. Threat classification updating. Class B+. Combatant demonstrating above expected durability. Recommend tactical reassessment. How? Velkthor demanded, genuinely baffled now. Did you absorb that impact without structural bone damage? The force coefficient alone should have fractured your radius and ulna. We train a lot, sir, Joanna replied cheerfully, shaking out her arm like she had just blocked a mild inconvenience rather than a strike that could disable most species. Plus, you know, Deathworld gravity and evolutionary pressure and all that fun stuff. Makes for dense bones, really dense bones. Velkthor had read the reports about human bone structure naturally. He had simply assumed they were exaggerated, the kind of propaganda that recruitment offices spread to make their candidates seem more impressive than reality supported. Humans came from a world with gravity only marginally higher than standard. Their planet was not even classified as a true heavy gravity environment. But watching Joanna advance on him now, her movements economical and precise, her breathing still controlled and even, he began to suspect that perhaps the reports had been conservative rather than exaggerated. He threw a combination designed for Kravian combat protocols: full aggression, minimal defense, overwhelming force applied at maximum speed, upper arms striking high while lower arms attempted grappling holds, his legs sweeping in a wide arc to destabilize her foundation. Joanna slipped inside his guard like water flowing around a stone, her hands catching his grappling attempt and redirecting it with a sharp twist that sent uncomfortable pressure signals through his joint sensors. She stepped over his sweep without breaking stride, and suddenly she was in his personal space, well within the danger zone where his reach advantage became a liability. The scanner stopped beeping and started blaring. Threat level rising. The display flashed an aggressive red holographic text. Combatant reclassification in progress. Current assessment, Class A-. Recommend elevated defensive protocol. Velkthor disengaged rapidly, using all four arms to push himself backward and create distance. His cardiovascular system was now operating at 80% capacity, which was 15% higher than he had needed in any evaluation in the past 4 cycles. "Cadet Briggs," he said, and was privately annoyed to hear a slight tremor in his vocal synthesizer output. "I believe we should recalibrate our approach to this assessment." "Whatever you think is best, sir," Joanna agreed, resetting to her ready stance with movements so smooth they looked choreographed. Her heart rate had dropped to 62 beats per minute, and Velkthor realized, with the cold clarity of a predator recognizing a superior hunter, that she had not been trying yet. Velkthor made a decision that he would later classify as catastrophically poor judgment, though in the moment it seemed perfectly rational. He decided to stop holding back entirely. The thing was, instructors always held back during evaluations. It was standard protocol, basic safety procedure, the foundation of responsible combat training. You applied enough pressure to assess capability without actually injuring your students, because injured students could not continue training, and training was the entire point of the exercise. But the scanner was screaming Class A- at him, and Joanna Briggs was standing there with that infuriating smile, and Velkthor's pride, which had survived 17 cycles of teaching without significant damage, was suddenly demanding satisfaction. So he planted his rear legs, coiled his entire body like a compressed spring, and launched a kick with his dominant right leg that contained approximately 95% of his actual combat capability. It was the kind of kick that could crack a security barrier. The kind of kick that had, in his younger days serving with the Thexari peacekeeping forces, disabled a combat mech during a boarding action. His leg became a blur of chitinous muscle and controlled violence, aimed directly at Joanna's center mass with enough kinetic energy to send her flying across the chamber. Joanna raised her left hand palm out and caught his foot mid-strike. Just caught it. One hand, not even braced with her other arm. Just her left hand extended casually like she was stopping a door from swinging closed. The impact made a sound like a thunderclap in the enclosed chamber, a sharp crack that echoed off the walls and probably registered on seismic sensors 3 floors down. Velkthor felt the shock of sudden deceleration travel up his leg, through his hip joint into his spine. His entire nervous system screamed contradictory information at him because his kick had stopped, completely stopped, without any of the expected follow-through that physics and momentum absolutely demanded should occur. Joanna slid backward maybe 10 centimeters, her boots squeaking slightly against the floor. She did not fall. She did not stumble. She did not even grunt from the effort. She just stood there, holding his foot in her hand, her fingers wrapped around his ankle like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Control yourself, cadet," she said quietly, and her voice carried absolutely zero strain, no elevation in pitch, no breathlessness. Nothing that suggested she had just arrested the kinetic energy of a full-power strike from a species that outweighed her by 40 kilograms. The scanner lost its mind completely. "Threat level critical," the display screamed in letters so bright they hurt to look at. "Combatant reclassification to class pending administrative review. Structural damage probability to facility, 18%. Recommend immediate evaluation suspension. Recommend instructor protective protocols. Recommend. Velkthor yanked his leg back and Joanna released it without resistance, but the damage to his ego was already catastrophic and irreparable. His secondary brain, the one responsible for threat assessment and survival instinct, was currently flooding his system with enough adrenaline analogs to fight off a pack of Raxian hunters, and his primary brain was trying very hard to process what had just occurred. She had blocked his kick, with one hand, without significant effort. "That is not possible," he said aloud. "Because sometimes when reality contradicted your understanding of the universe, you simply had to voice the objection. The force coefficient, the mass differential, the basic principles of kinetic energy transfer, none of that. You should not." "How?" Joanna lowered her hand, flexed her fingers experimentally, and shrugged with both shoulders in that peculiarly human gesture of casual dismissal. You have got good form, sir, really clean technique, but you telegraphed the wind up by about 0.3 seconds. Gave me plenty of time to set my stance and brace properly. Also, and I mean this respectfully, you are still pulling your strikes. I am absolutely not, Velkthor protested immediately, because that was a direct challenge to his professional integrity and also because he knew, with sinking certainty, that she was completely correct. He had been pulling his strikes, not consciously, not deliberately, but some deep instinctive part of his brain had been applying safety limiters to every attack because she looked small and fragile and humans were supposed to be weak newcomers to the galactic stage who needed protection and guidance. Except Joanna Briggs had just stopped his best kick with one hand while maintaining conversational tone. The memories hit him then, fragments of reports and briefings he had skimmed through without real attention because they seemed too absurd to take seriously. Human bone density 3 times galactic average. Human muscle fiber efficiency, exponentially higher than comparable species. Human pain tolerance classified as near pathological by medical standards. Human recovery time from injuries, described as borderline regenerative. And the gravity. Oh, ancestors forgive him. The gravity. Earth's gravity was not marginally higher than standard. It was 9.8 meters per second squared, which translated to approximately 1.35 times galactic standard. And humans had evolved under that crushing weight for millions of years. Every single day, every single moment of their existence spent fighting against a force that would exhaust most species within hours. Joanna had been wearing a gravity handicap her entire life, and she had just casually blocked a strike that would hospitalize most soldiers without even breathing hard. You have been training under Earth standard gravity, Velkthor said slowly, working through the implications with growing horror. Which means here, under our standard 1G environment, you are effectively operating at what? 65% of your actual body weight. More like 74%, sir, Joanna corrected helpfully. Earth gravity is about 1.35 standard, so the proportional reduction, yeah, we are all significantly lighter here, makes movement easier, less strain on the cardiovascular system, improved endurance metrics across the board. The scanner was still flashing its recommendations, now adding new warnings about potential facility damage if the evaluation continued and suggesting that perhaps Velkthor might want to consider calling for backup instructors, preferably ones wearing armor. Velkthor looked at Joanna, who was stretching her shoulders and neck like this was a light warm-up session rather than a combat evaluation that had just reclassified her as a Class S threat. He thought about the 73 other species he had trained over 17 cycles. He thought about his confident dismissal of human combat potential just 30 minutes earlier, and he realized with absolutely crystalline clarity that he had made a terrible fundamental miscalculation about what humans actually were. Would you like me to explain what we are doing wrong, sir? Joanna asked, and the polite phrasing somehow made it worse because she was offering to teach him, the 17-cycle veteran instructor, about combat fundamentals. Velkthor's pride was a wounded, snarling thing in his chest. But his survival instinct was screaming louder when somewhere in between those two warring impulses he heard himself say, "Please proceed, cadet." "Right, so, basic human martial arts theory," Joanna began, and then she moved. Velkthor threw a defensive combination, all 4 arms working in coordinated defensive shells, because he had finally accepted that this was not an evaluation anymore, this was a learning experience, and he was the student. Joanna flowed through his guard like smoke, her movements economical and precise. She tapped his upper left elbow joint, not hard, just enough pressure to demonstrate the vulnerability. Humans fight in close quarters because our ancestors were persistence hunters, right? We chased prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. So we evolved for endurance over burst strength, efficiency over raw power. She ducked under his retaliatory sweep, continuing her explanation without pause. Which means our entire combat fallacy is built around outlasting opponents, absorbing damage and exploiting weaknesses through sustained pressure rather than overwhelming force. Velkthor spun, attempting a grapple with his lower arms while his upper arms maintained striking position. Standard multi-limbed combatant tactics, literally textbook protocol. Joanna caught one grasping hand, redirected it into his other hand, and suddenly he was grappling himself while she stepped casually to his left side. See, that works great against 2 armed opponents, but humans train against multiple attackers from like day 1 of basic self-defense courses. We assume we are outnumbered, outweighed, and at a disadvantage. That is our baseline. The chamber doors opened. and Velkther peripherally registered other instructors and cadets gathering at the entrance, drawn by the scanner's increasingly frantic alarm broadcasts. He should have felt embarrassed, should have been humiliated at being instructed by a cadet in front of his peers. Instead, he felt fascinated, terrified, and deeply, genuinely curious. "Demonstrate your striking capability," he commanded, resetting to a defensive stance and trying to salvage some instructional authority. "Full contact, I will block." Joanna's expression shifted slightly, the smile fading into something more serious, more focused. "Are you sure, sir? I do not want to injure you. I have endured Kravian berserker charges and Vrelian acid spitters," Velkther replied with significantly more confidence than he actually felt. "I believe I can handle one human punch." "Okay," Joanna said quietly, and her stance changed in subtle ways that the scanner immediately registered with escalating threat warnings. "Brace yourself, sir." She punched him in the center mass, a straight right cross with her full body weight behind it, and Velkther's entire defensive structure collapsed like tissue paper in a hurricane. The impact drove him backward 3 full meters, his feet leaving the ground entirely for a moment before he crashed down on his secondary stabilizers. His chest plate, reinforced combat-rated polymer designed to distribute kinetic impacts, had a visible compression dent shaped exactly like Joanna's fist. His respiratory system seized momentarily, his vision blurred around the edges, and his pain receptors informed him that several internal support structures were now experiencing significant stress fractures. The scanner stopped suggesting protective protocols and started suggesting immediate medical evaluation. The gathered crowd of instructors and cadets made a collective noise of shock and awe, which would have been gratifying under different circumstances, but currently just made Velkther more aware of his complete failure to understand what he was dealing with. "Sorry, sir," Joanna called out, genuinely apologetic now. "You said full contact. Should I have pulled it more?" "That was pulled," Velkther wheezed, his translator crackling slightly from diaphragm damage. "I mean, yeah, that was maybe 40%. Joanna tilted her head, considering. "I did not use hip rotation or follow-through. Kept it pretty contained. Full power would probably have been problematic for the chest plate integrity." Senior Instructor Kavix, then, a Pelaxian heavy combat specialist, pushed through the crowd to stand at the observation line. "Velkther, is that human actually registering Class S on the scanner? Or is the equipment malfunctioning?" "Equipment is functioning perfectly," Velkther managed, straightening with effort and triggering his secondary respiratory system to compensate for his damaged primary. "She is actually Class S, possibly higher. I have been re-evaluating my entire understanding of Deathworld classifications for the past 6 minutes. They said humans were fragile," someone in the crowd muttered, an Arxian pilot track cadet based on the vocal harmonics. "They said humans were soft, easily damaged, required protective equipment for basic training exercises." Joanna turned toward the crowd, and her smile returned, bright and friendly and absolutely terrifying in context. "Oh, we are fragile compared to our own standards, which is why we wear protective gear. But our standards might be slightly different than galactic baseline. We heal fast though, so it balances out." The scanner, now displaying enough warning messages that they were overlapping into incomprehensibility, updated her classification one final time. "Class S+, Extreme Threat Designation. Recommend treating as combat veteran equivalent regardless of actual service record." Velkther looked at the scanner, looked at Joanna, looked at his dented chest plate, and made the second best decision of his teaching career right after the best decision, which was not dying from pride-driven stupidity 10 minutes earlier. "Class dismissed for today," he announced to the chamber at large. "All instructors, emergency staff meeting in Conference Hall 7 in 30 minutes. Topic: comprehensive reassessment of human combat protocols and why everything we thought we knew was catastrophically incorrect." Joanna raised her hand politely. "Does that mean I passed the evaluation, sir?" Velkther spent the next 2 hours in medical bay while technicians repaired his cracked thoracic support structure and administered anti-inflammatory compounds to his bruised internal organs. He spent those 2 hours watching the evaluation footage on a datapad, replaying the moment Joanna caught his kick approximately 47 times, because his brain still refused to fully process what his eyes were showing him. The academy administrators watched the footage exactly once, and then initiated an emergency protocols review that would eventually cascade through every military training facility in the Galactic Defense Network. Director Kellenix, a Vorthian administrator with 32 cycles of service and the kind of calm demeanor that came from seeing literally everything, sat across from Velkthor in the recovery room and watched the one-handed block sequence without commentary. When it finished, she was silent for approximately 15 seconds. "So," she finally said, her translator rendering her native language into standard with perfect, emotionless clarity. "The humans have been practicing what we can only describe as extreme humility regarding their actual combat capabilities." "That is one interpretation," Velkthor agreed, shifting carefully to avoid stressing his repairs. "Another interpretation is that we have been catastrophically, dangerously, almost criminally negligent in our threat assessment protocols, and we are extremely fortunate that humans appear to be genuinely committed to peaceful cooperation rather than, say, hostile conquest." Kelnix made a gesture with her manipulator tendrils that suggested deep consideration mixed with existential concern. "The preliminary analysis suggests that if Earth had chosen military expansion rather than diplomatic integration, resulting conflict would have lasted approximately 6 months before total galactic capitulation." "6 months seems optimistic," Velkthor muttered, thinking about Joanna's casual explanation of 40% power output and wondering what 100% actually looked like. He decided he did not want to know, and also that he absolutely needed to know, and that contradiction was going to haunt him for the foreseeable future. "We are convening an emergency session of the Combat Classification Council," Kelnix continued, pulling up holographic documents that filled the air between them with bureaucratic urgency. "Every human currently enrolled in military training programs will undergo immediate reassessment. We are also requesting that Earth provide detailed documentation of their actual training standards, because clearly the information we received during initial integration was either incomplete or we fundamentally misunderstood the context." "They train children in combat sports," Velkthor said quietly, remembering a detail from the human integration files he had dismissed as quaint cultural tradition. "For recreation. For entertainment. They have younglings who have not reached maturity yet competing in regulated combat matches for trophies and ranking status." Kelnix's tendrils went very still, which was the Vorthian equivalent of profound alarm. "Clarify, they train pre-adults in combat protocols as leisure activity. They call it martial arts, or boxing or wrestling, or approximately 40 other terms for formalized violence conducted under rule structures," Velkthor explained, pulling up the relevant files on his datapad. "It is considered normal childhood development, character building they call it, discipline, respect, physical fitness, self-confidence through controlled aggression. By the ancestors," Kelnix breathed, "we have been integrating a species of warrior philosophers who teach their children to fight before they teach them advanced mathematics. Actually, they teach both simultaneously," Velkthor corrected, because accuracy mattered even in the face of paradigm-shattering revelations. "Humans have remarkable cognitive plasticity. They can compartmentalize violence and compassion, aggression and kindness, predatory instinct and social cooperation in ways that our psychological models suggest should be contradictory but apparently are not." The emergency staff meeting 3 hours later was the most heavily attended mandatory briefing in Academy history. Every combat instructor, tactical trainer and defensive protocol specialist crammed into Conference Hall 7, which meant approximately 200 individuals from 60 species all trying to understand how they had gotten humans so completely fundamentally wrong. Velkthor stood at the front, his chest still aching despite the medical repairs, and addressed his peers with the kind of humility that only comes from being physically humbled by someone a third-year mass. "The primary lesson," he began, displaying the footage of Joanna's one-handed block on the main holographic projector, "is that humans smile when they are comfortable, not when they are submissive. This is critical information that we all failed to contextualize properly." He let the image freeze on Joanna's face, that bright, friendly, utterly terrifying smile captured in perfect clarity. When a human smiles during combat, they are not being friendly or reassuring, they are informing you in their own culturally specific way that they are exactly where they want to be, doing exactly what they were designed to do, and you should be very, very concerned about your immediate future. Senior Instructor Kovacs then raised a manipulator appendage. "What is our recommended protocol for training human cadets going forward?" Velkthor considered the question carefully, thinking about Joanna's casual explanations, her effortless demonstrations, her genuine apology for a punch that had nearly required his hospitalization. "Honesty," he finally answered. "Complete, transparent honesty about our own limitations and their capabilities. Humans respond well to respect, adapt quickly to challenges, and apparently consider combat training to be somewhere between recreational activity and professional obligation. We stop treating them like fragile newcomers who need protection, and we start treating them like the apex predators they actually are. He paused, letting that sink in among his fellow instructors. And most importantly, he continued, touching his damaged chest plate, unconsciously. We never, under any circumstances, assume we know their limits, because the moment you think you have seen a human's maximum capability, the moment you believe you understand what they are truly capable of, that is precisely when they will demonstrate that they have been holding back the entire time. The scanner footage played on loop behind him, Joanna's hand catching his kick, her smile never wavering, her threat classification climbing toward categories that had previously only been theoretical. Class S+, Velkthor said quietly. For a species that considers itself fragile, that trains its children in combat for fun, that evolved to chase prey until it died from exhaustion and then decided that was not challenging enough. So they invented persistence hunting in low oxygen, high-gravity environments just to make things interesting. He looked around the conference hall, meeting the optical sensors and visual organs of every instructor present. We are not training humans anymore, he concluded. We are learning from them, and hoping very sincerely that they continue to like us enough to keep pretending we are all equals in this galactic community. The meeting adjourned in thoughtful, slightly terrified silence. And somewhere in the cadet dormitories, Joanna Briggs was probably doing push-ups for fun, completely unaware that she had just restructured military training protocols across 73 worlds. Or perhaps, Velkthor thought, with his newly acquired paranoia about human capabilities, she knew exactly what she had done and was simply being polite about it. With humans he was learning. It was impossible to tell the difference. And that, more than anything else, was the most terrifying revelation of all.